Mrs. Green Apple. Although you would be forgiven for maybe not thinking that's what we were checking out based on what's here, unless you read the bit at the top. Look, let me talk about this one and why I'm going to be doing a reaction today, because as you guys might be aware, I've been doing track by track reactions to every single Mrs. Green Apple album. We've been going through to the point where we've kind of almost covered all of it now. We're currently going through Ensemble, because I kind of started at the end and went round to the beginning. But look, I've been learning so much about this band, and every now and then they're going to have a new song because they're currently leading up to yet another new album coming out. And this one in particular, I had to check it out. Why did I have to check this song out that just came out how long ago? Came out like a few minutes ago. 16 minutes ago. Why do I have to check this one out? Well, because of the fact that this actually kind of raised an interesting memory for me. Now, as you can probably see from the cover, this is the theme tune in Japan for the new Spider-Man film that's coming out this year. And this is especially interesting for me because I had never really done much talking before about the rather bizarre fact that movies will often come out, especially Western movies obviously, will come out with a Japanese specific, or I'm assuming many region specific theme tunes. That's interesting because you think a theme tune's a big thing, it plays maybe over the closing credits, but maybe at other points in the movie as well. And it's very much something that really, it's like the coffee you have at the end of the meal or the glass of wine, if you want to be posh. It's that thing that gives you the final taste. So it's really interesting that it's region specific. And I'm interested how the different theme tunes sound for this movie. I've got to be honest, this isn't a movie that I would particularly be overly drawn to watching otherwise. I am absolutely the quintessential example of someone who had superhero fatigue from pretty much the minute they started making them. But I do remember when I was much younger, and I'm going to show how old I am now, I remember when that first Spider-Man movie came out, and I remember that because that was the one where they had Sum 41 were rapping on the soundtrack. If you don't know who Sum 41 are, then congratulations, you're not as old as I am. But I remember that, and I remember there was like a whole big thing that the soundtrack was the whole thing that pretty much sold that movie. Like, so many people were excited about that movie because there were so many famous people on the soundtrack. So anyway, yeah, Mrs. Green Apple, probably the biggest band in Japan, whether you just looking at it commercially or not. I think that's something that can be safely argued. And they have a theme tune for a movie that I'm pretty sure is going to make an insane amount of money. It's called Brand New. The cover, I gotta be honest, is pretty cool. I like it. So, what are we going to get from the song? I'm really intrigued to know whether this is going to be them going in a totally different direction to do something really wildly specific for a soundtrack, or whether they're just going to be Mrs. Green Apple and say, look, let's do a safe Mrs. Green Apple song. Either way, we're going to check this out, and I'm assuming this will also feature on their new album. I do not know that, but I assume that. I wonder if they've said anything about that before I'm making too many assumptions. Nothing clearly telling me that. You guys are probably seeing something I'm not, right? Oh, program recording arranged by Shu Kanematsu. Okay. Wait, hold up. This is written by Omori, though, right? I'm assuming it's written by Omori. Okay, so recording arranger. That's all written as one word. But anyway, we'll get into that later. I'm assuming this is an Omori song, as all Mrs. Green Apple songs pretty much are. So let's jump in, have a little listen, see what we think afterwards. That's a pretty intro. That is a punchy intro. Oh, I'm loving them strings. The kick is really intense on the beat there. That's a big chorus as well. This is a proper headbanger. taken by how punchy this recording is. You still hear like the keyboard and the guitar and all their usual intricacies in there. But the mix is definitely more cinematic. Focusing on that big beat. And such an alarming release. The bass and the kick are really very punchy. I'm loving that choppy string arrangement, partly punchy and a little bit of mix. Choppy mixing. Again, kick. And even the bass. Oh man, whoever mixed this knew exactly what they were going for. That 4 chord, but each time it comes round, the bass deviates each time. Yeah. Okay, we got a lot to talk about on this one. All right, first things first, we have to kick in straight away just by talking about the effect of this song, and then we'll go into some of the details. But the effect of this, truly, if you were going for cinematic, I actually think they hit that really well. Because the funny thing is that Mrs. Green Apple, just by default, has a very cinematic sound. You know, they usually like to go for those big, impressive choruses. Strings and things are not something they're afraid to put into their arrangements. This is a band who we expect to sound big the majority of the time. But in this particular example, wow. It really did come across very large. And I think a large part of that as well was the fact that the mix here, as in the way that the EQ is done on the various instruments, you know, what pops in the bass, what pops the bass range of your headphones, what pops in the higher ranges of the frequencies, all of that was balanced in a way that was clearly designed to be more about impact. It kind of felt like it was more the sort of song you'd hear in a cinema. A lot of the time with Mrs. Green Apple songs, I feel like the emphasis is actually more balanced towards clarity. You know, they go for mixes where there's a lot of delicate sounds that really punch through. You know, you tend to hear every last little bit of piano. You tend to hear all of the strings, and everything feels large just because of the amount of layering. This feels more large just because of the fact that they are cranking the bass up so that every single kick really sort of resonates through your head. And so the bass, which is obviously written with this kind of EQ in mind, once again, is not playing anything super complicated, but you're getting a lot of those sort of thumping boom, 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 boom kind of bass lines, and you're getting the kick as well is kind of constant, and it's just kind of like playing throughout. And the result is that you end up with this very active and yet at the same time clearly defined bottom end of the song that's just sort of bouncing and punching all the way through the song. And then at the top end, you know, the vocals are very clean and crisp, and there's a lot going on the higher frequencies. The middle range, where you usually hear a lot of the things like the piano and the guitar, I got to be honest, that definitely felt like it was a little less defined in this mix. But it wasn't muddy. I couldn't hear those things, but you could see that they kind of sacrificed the piano and guitar sounds down a little bit to focus more on the big sound of the strings and the kick and the bass. And these are, if you like, the sounds that you would more commonly associate with a soundtrack-esque kind of sound. So yeah, it's a different type of big, but it's definitely still big. This is mixed in a way it's a little bit different from other Mrs. Green Apple songs, but you can tell it's a very intentional mix. It's not like Mrs. Green Apple wrote a song and then someone just came in and screwed it up on the mixing desk. So I think this is a very interesting, different, and more cinematic way of approaching the sound that we're used to hearing from them. When it actually comes to the writing, though, intriguingly enough, I think that the core, as I've sometimes said with the Omori, the core sort of scales that the melody follows and the chord patterns, it's all very sort of familiar Mrs. Green Apple territory. I don't feel like this song is, from a writing perspective, taking them in any new direction, but what instead it is doing is kind of delivering on the most catchy, reliable, hard-hitting version of the Mrs. Green Apple sound that you can muster. You know how I said at the beginning that I was wondering whether they were going to go into a weird direction or whether they were just going to sort of deliver their core sound? This is kind of what I meant. You can go in a weird direction, surprise people and do something special and just go, oh, we're going to do this really weird sound just for the soundtrack of this movie because, it's just a movie soundtrack, let's do something bizarre. Or you can say, they wanted us to give them a recognizable single to sell their movie. So we're going to do the thing that we do best. And that's, to me, what Mrs. Green Apple feel like they're doing from a writing perspective. I just thought this was punchy, engaging, fun, really bright. Still had those little moments where occasionally something will pop in, like you get a moment where the beat drops out, then it comes back in. You get the little moments where the piano just has a little individual run, and then the bass the bass was pretty solid throughout this, but then moments where the guitar would step up. There was little moments where Omori did something fun with his voice and just reached for an unusual note. There were just these little moments of detail that really kept it still feeling like it had the Mrs. Green Apple qualities that we know and love, even down to the key change at the end. Those little moments that make you feel like this is not a complacent song, as much as they might just be going to deliver a Mrs. Green Apple classic kind of song. From a writing perspective, it's not a complacent copy-paste. It's a song where you can really feel there are still those unique details in there. So for me, this was very enjoyable, but in a kind of intriguing way. It's like seeing an old familiar friend, but in a new, refreshed setting. It's like... It's like going to a fancy restaurant in Hollywood and buying the same meal that your family made for you growing up. It's like you're going to recognize it, you're still going to enjoy it for all the same reasons, but it's going to have a slightly different sheen just because of the setting. That's the way I would describe this song. So anyway, there you go. Those are my thoughts as always. Get in the comments. Tell me what you think. I believe it's going to be on the new album. Let me know. Tell me a little bit more if you know more about how the kind of the soundtrack thing works. Because I got to be honest, like when it comes to American movies, I don't tend to watch many American movies in Japan. Most of the movies I watch in Japan are actually the Japanese ones, but or the ones that fall off the internet onto my computer. But outside of that. Yeah, let me know. Is there any sort of cool examples you can think of Japanese bands doing theme tunes for the localized versions of American or Western movies? It'd be really cool to hear something like that. But anyway, get in the comments. Tell me what you think about this until I hopefully see you very soon for the next one of these. For now, ciao, ciao.